You're listening to Stand Out Get Noticed, episode 246. Hi there, Rockstar, and welcome to Stand Out Get Noticed. I'm your host, Christina Canters, speaker, coach, and founder of The C Method, where I help high-performing professionals to build powerful communication skills. To get started, join my free Small Talk Made Simple course at thecmethod.com/free course. That's thecmethod.com/free course. Okay, Rockstar, so we are asking one of the big questions this week. How do I be happy? I know it's one of those, it's not something that I usually talk about on the podcast, but this is something that I learned while I was on Vipassana. Now, if you tuned in last week, you'll know that I did a podcast about my experience doing the 10-day silent meditation Vipassana course, and I talked about what it was like, how painful it was, what I went through. And I did promise that I would share some lessons, some things that I learned, because I learned so much. It was full on. I got a lot out of it. And this is one of those things, how to be happy or how to not be miserable. So yes, folks, I'm about to share with you the secret to happiness. Here's the thing with happiness, right? Everyone knows intellectually that happiness comes from within, right? Well, if you didn't, then there's your first answer to happiness. It comes from within. And I always knew this on an intellectual level. Like, yes, I can't get happy, buying new shoes isn't going to make me happy. Going on holiday isn't going to make me happy. Getting more money isn't going to make me happy. Those material things, I know at an intellectual level, don't bring happiness. I know that happiness comes from within, but I always thought to myself, but how do you access the happiness? How do you draw out the happiness? I know the happiness is inside, but how do I get it out? Like, how do I pull it out? And what I learned on Vipassana was that it's not actually about pulling out the happiness. It's not about, finding happiness is not actually about drawing it out or creating happiness. Here's what it's about. You ready? It's about removing the things in your life that make you miserable. I'll repeat that. So to find happiness or to be happy is not about actually creating happiness. It's about removing what makes us miserable. Now, when I learned this, I was like, mind blown. I was like, that's amazing. And here's what I learned. Here's what makes us miserable. There's two things, according to the Vipassana teachings, two things that make us miserable. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention this in the last episode, but the Vipassana technique is non-religious. So they don't teach Buddhism or any other religious teachings, and they accept people from any religion. So you can be of any religion, you can be of any background, you can be an atheist, doesn't even matter. What they teach is universal. Okay, so everything I'm about to share with you here is, it's not based in religious teachings at all. So according to the teachings, there are two things that make us miserable. Number one, something unwanted happens to us and we create aversion to it, right? So something unwanted happens and we create aversion to it. An example of this could be, getting stuck in traffic, getting a parking ticket, someone says something nasty to you or interrupts you, maybe your flight gets cancelled, maybe you drop your phone and the screen cracks, maybe, you get sick or you get broken up with or your dog gets measles, whatever it is. There, so many things happen, little things, major things. Something unwanted happens to us and we create an aversion. And when I say aversion, they refer to as a strong negative emotion. So it might be anger, frustration, fear, sadness, jealousy. That person said that thing to me. How dare she? That now I feel awful. Now I feel, I feel undermined, or I don't feel appreciated because you said that thing to me. Why wouldn't you say that thing to me? That's creating aversion to something. Your flight gets cancelled. Oh, this is terrible. Now I'm going to be late. Oh, my life is the worst. Why do these things always happen to me? That's aversion. So those things are going to create misery within you, right? That's going to make you miserable. If someone does something to you that you don't like and you get angry, you're going to be miserable. If you get frustrated because you're stuck in traffic, you're going to be miserable. And we're constantly in this misery if we continue to create aversion to unwanted things. So that's the first thing that makes us miserable. The second thing that makes us miserable is something that we want does not happen, and we create attachment to having it, right? So something that we want doesn't happen, and then as a result of not getting it, because we're attached to it, we then are miserable. So, for example, let's say you're lining up for coffee, right? You really want your coffee in the morning. It's 9 a.m., you need your morning coffee. You're like, oh, I so badly want this coffee. It's going to be so good. And then you get to the front of the line and they have run out of coffee. Well, they've run out of cups, so they've run out of something and you can't get your coffee. What are you going to do? Many of us will go, oh, but I really wanted that coffee. Now, what am I going to do? I can't work. I'm not going to be able to focus. I really want my coffee. So that in itself is creating misery. So something that we want does not happen. We create attachment to having it and we make ourselves miserable. In the meditations, right, the way that we learned this experientially was we would sit and we would observe the sensations in our body. And because we were sitting for like 10 hours a day meditating, I often had pain in my body. And so an example of, I would create aversion to it. I'd have a pain in my hip and I'd go, oh, my hip's so sore. Why is it sore? I don't want it to be sore. My body's crap. It's, I can't sit like this. This isn't fair. And I would start to get frustrated. And there's me creating aversion to this pain that I'm feeling in my body. It's something that's happened that I don't want, right? And I create aversion to it. So that created misery for me. And then an example of how you could create attachment in the meditations is that you might observe like a pleasant tingly sensation, or you might observe a nice cool breeze on your cheek, or you might observe some people had the experience of they were floating. And what happens then is that you have a tendency to go, oh, I feel like I'm floating, I'm tingling, this is amazing. And then the next time you sit down to meditate, it doesn't happen, and all you feel is pins and needles and stabbing pain in your legs. Then all of a sudden you start craving that floating sensation, and you think, why am I not floating? Why am I not in a nice tingly feeling? Where's that cool breeze? Come back, it's boiling hot in here. And that in itself creates the misery. And it was interesting because I was thinking to myself, but surely it's okay to want something, right? So let's say you like a delicious type of food, or you want to go on a particular holiday, or you want to hang out with, your favorite people. I went and asked the teacher, because you're allowed to talk. You're meant to be silent. You're not allowed to talk to the other students, but you can talk to the teacher to ask questions. And I asked her, surely, like, is it okay to want to eat a type of food and look forward to that? And she said, there's a difference between desire and craving. She said, it's okay to desire something, like I desire having that delicious hamburger, but as long as you're not craving it, and, if it gets taken away from you, you're not upset about it. So I thought this was really interesting, because I could understand how things can make us miserable. If something happens to us and it makes us miserable, I can understand why that makes us miserable. I'm like, okay, I get that. Someone says something to you, you don't like it, makes you miserable. Like if I'm, speaking to an audience and someone talks back at me, or they, are frowning at me, in my own mind, I'm going, oh my God, they don't like me. That's unwanted that's happening to me. And then that makes me, fearful and therefore miserable. But the attachment to something that we want was more subtle for me, right? It was more subtle for me. It's a more subtle form of misery. And so I decided to test this. I started to think about, what are the things in my life, or even right here in the meditation course, what are some of the things that I'm attached to that is creating misery for me in a way that I'm not even aware? And I started to test it. And so I realized I started to think about something that I desired, right? And then I imagined myself not having it or having it taken away from me. So, you can do this right now. So think about something. It could be material, like I want the new iPhone, I want a new car or shoes, I want more money. Or it could be intangible. I want that promotion. I want to go on this upcoming holiday. I'm looking forward to this party. Or it could even be a feeling that you desire. So happiness, pleasure, accomplishment, appreciation, right? Something you desire. Now imagine yourself not having it or have it being taken away from you. So think about you get your new iPhone and you unwrap it, you unpeel the plastic off and you're like, oh, yay. And then what happens if someone steals it or you drop it straight away and it breaks, right? So that thing's taken away from you. What feelings does that then create? Do you feel upset? Do you feel disappointed or angry? And if so, if this is the case, this means that you are attached and this attachment is making you miserable. I'll give you an example. Aaron and I had tickets to Rainbow Serpent Festival, which happens over Australia Day weekend, which is the weekend we just had. We buy tickets every year, and every year I'm looking forward to it so much, looking forward to it. And then late last year, we realized that we couldn't go because we just bought our new home and then settlement date and the moving weekend was going to be that same weekend. And we thought, we're going to have to sell our tickets. We just can't figure out a way around this. We're going to have to not go. So that thing and I was looking forward to it so much. I look forward to it every year. And then that thing was taken away from both of us. And we both felt miserable. We felt frustrated. We felt sad. We're like, but we were so looking forward to going. And then when I was in Vipassana, I realized that I was creating that misery because that thing that I wanted, even though it was like a source of happiness for me at the time, because it was a source of, excitement, looking forward to it, enthusiastic about it. Even though that was like feelings of happiness, taking it away actually created feelings that made me miserable. So it's really interesting to understand how the things that we think make us happy are actually making us miserable. The things that we desire and have attachment to and think that bring us joy. Let's say you're going shopping, right? And you're, I really want those new shoes. They're going to make me so happy. As soon as I have those shoes, they're going to make me happy. But as soon as if you get the shoes and then someone takes them away, or you can't get them, so let's say they don't have your size, right? Then you feel sad, you feel upset. And then all of a sudden that thing that was supposed to make you happy is also the cause of your misery. So the idea is to remove that, all right? To remove those attachments. So when I was I'll tell you a story. When I was on the meditation course, I started to test this. And I had noticed that I had developed a deep attachment to breakfast. Now, on the course, breakfast was our first quote-unquote reward for the day because we'd woken up at 4 o'clock, we meditated from 4:30 to 6:30, and then breakfast was at 6:30. So that 6:30 a.m. bell that rang to signal breakfast was like, it was music to my ears. And we were treated to a smorgasbord of delicious breakfast. There was cooked oats, yogurt, stewed fruit, muesli, fresh fruit and toast and herbal teas and coffee. And over the first few days, I experimented with building my perfect breakfast. I was like, what are the bits that I like? And I decided, I came to, my perfect breakfast, which was a delicious combination of yogurt and stewed fruit that was topped with shredded coconut and sesame seeds and nuts and cinnamon, and the crowning glory, slices of fresh banana. Right? So this was my perfect breakfast that I began to, crave every morning because it was like a reward for me after getting up so early. And I would take my time to slowly savor it each morning. And then on, I think it was either day 6 or day 7, I'm at the breakfast line, right? Because it's like a long buffet and you sort of get in line with people and you move through. I'm moving through the breakfast line, and when I look to the end of the table and I see the fruit bowl with one banana left. And of course, the sliced banana on my breakfast is the best bit, right? It's my favorite bit of breakfast. And there is one woman in the line in front of me. And I see her looking at the fruit bowl. And in my mind, I silently beg, please don't take the banana. Please don't take the banana. Please don't take the banana. She reaches out and grabs the banana. I start to stress in my mind and I'm thinking, okay, she's taking the banana. I think, okay, don't stress. Maybe she'll cut it in half. She'll cut it in half. It's a big banana. Surely she can't eat the whole banana. She's going to cut it in half. She'll put the other half back and then I'll be able to have my banana and have my perfect breakfast. And I watch in silent desperation as she proceeds to slice the entire banana over her oats. Now, if this had happened on day 4, I would have had a silent internal tantrum. Because remember, we can't actually say anything, right? We have to be silent. I can't actually say to this lady, oh, do you mind if I have half of that banana? Do you mind sharing that with me? There's none of that. You just have to go for it, just grab it and you can't say anything. And so if this happened on day 3 or 4, I would have had a tantrum inside. I can just imagine my internal dialogue would have run, that's not fair. I wanted that banana. Why would you take the whole thing? She's so greedy. Why don't they put out more bananas? Damn it. You should have got to breakfast earlier, Christina. You need to get there early so that you can get the banana. Like that's what would have gone in my head. And then that would have created a lot of misery for me, right? Over a banana. Like some of you might be thinking, Christina, that's ridiculous. But seriously, like these were something as simple as wanting banana on my breakfast, I had created attachment to. And when I couldn't get the banana, I then began to feel miserable. This is what happens when we get attached to things, no matter how small. Now, thankfully, this was day 7 when this incident occurred, and I was much wiser and slightly more enlightened than I was on day 4. So as I watched the last banana make its final resting place on someone else's bowl, I thought to myself, I'm not attached to having this banana. I'm not attached to having this banana. I do not need this banana to make me happy. I am non-reactive to no more bananas. And with that, I selected a nice looking nectarine instead, and I sliced that over my breakfast and I continued to enjoy my meal. Was it as good as the banana breakfast? Maybe not, but I was able to still enjoy my breakfast in peace without being upset about missing out on the banana. So here's the thing. The reason we are not happy is because we make ourselves miserable. And this banana incident was an example of how something so simple could have made me really miserable. But what happened on day 7, and I mentioned this last week, so I was basically miserable during Vipassana. It was 10 days. I was miserable for the first 7 days, desperately unhappy for the first 6 days. And on day 7, I had an epiphany where I realized that I had been making myself miserable the entire time. And it was because I had been creating attachments to things that I did not want and aversions to things that happened to me that I did not want. So those 2 things that I mentioned that cause us misery, I was experiencing them and I was creating them myself. For example, when I was in the meditations and you're there for like 90 minutes, 2 hours, I desperately wanted the meditations to end so I could come out of my physical pain, so I could move around and so that I could, come out of my boredom. So I wanted the break. I wanted to be on break, but I couldn't be there. I had to be in meditation. So I wanted something and I couldn't get it, so I was miserable. And then so I was thinking, oh, if only I can be on break. Oh, can't wait until breakfast. Can't wait until lunch. Can't wait until the break so I can move around. And then when I was on break, initially I'd be like, yes, I'm on break. I get to eat. I get to drink. I get to go to the bathroom. Yes, I get to move around. I'm out of meditation. Great. And then as soon as I, finish my meal, I'd be like, I still have like another hour and 15 minutes on break. What on earth am I going to do in this time? And I was in so much boredom. I think, when is break going to end? And so I was craving or wanting the break to end, but I couldn't have it. And so I was miserable on the break. And then I'd be back in meditation, desperately wanting to be on break. And then on break, desperately wanting for the break to end. So I was in this constant state of misery. And then on day 7, I realized that I've been creating attachments. And so it was in that moment that I decided I'm not going to crave to be out of the meditation. I'm not going to crave for the break to end. I'm just going to be present in the moment and observe what's going on as is. And as soon as I made that realization, a huge weight just lifted off my shoulders and I felt so at peace. Now, I'm not going to say that I felt overjoyed, happy. I wasn't like, woohoo, I'm super happy now. It was more of a inner peace, inner contentment and just being okay with where I was. And you know what's interesting? Nothing else had changed. My environment was the same. I was still in this very quiet prison. I still was not allowed to talk to anyone. I still had to meditate for 10 hours a day. I still had very strict meal times and bedtimes. I had a lot of rules. Everything else was the same, except my mindset had shifted. And once I had that realization, I started to think about what were the other areas of my life where I was also doing this? Where else was I making myself miserable? And I realized that I was doing this with the weather. So for example, in wintertime, I'd be like, oh, it's so cold. I just want it to be warmer. And then in the summertime, I'd be like, oh, it's so hot. I wish it was cooler. And it's like, it's ridiculous when you think about it. Constantly wanting something else, wanting something that you don't have. I was in, this perpetual misery. And it's the same with, I was like wanting to go on holiday as well. Like if I had a trip coming up, I remember, so Aaron and I went to Europe a couple of years ago for 6 weeks. Amazing, right? And I remember I was looking so forward to going to Rome. And I was thinking, Rome's going to be so good. I'm going to be creative. I'm going to write my book. I'm going to sit in the courtyard and drink cappuccino and write and be creative and amazing. I'm going to make all this stuff. And then when I was there, I was like, I'm so tired. I don't want to get up and do work. And it's, working is so much easier when I'm at home, when I have my proper office, my proper desk set up and proper internet that works. So I was actually, I'm not saying that I was miserable in Rome, but I was creating elements of misery while I was there. And has this happened to you before where you're like wanting, like craving to be on holiday, and then when you're on holiday, kind of wishing or like wanting to be back home again? And I noticed that I was doing this. So this is something that I became acutely aware of, and I realized, you know what? I want to start not doing this. I want to start removing these attachments, removing this aversion from my life. So I'm going to share with you how you can start to do this. And a note before I start is that something else that they teach us in Vipassana is that you need to learn things at an experiential level. So this is why we had to sit for 10 hours a day, because that we were experiencing the depths of pain, the depths of like not wanting to be there. And I learned it at a very deep experiential level. So learning by listening to this podcast will give you an intellectual understanding. You'll be like, oh yeah, I get that, Christina, I understand. But it won't give you the experiential learning. So this is why I run programs like my group program and the academy, because I know that simply listening to this podcast is not enough if you don't take action. So that's why I run my programs with in groups to provide people with the accountability and the structure to learn something experientially. Okay, so with that side note, how can you then start to remove those sources of misery? So the first step is to observe what is currently happening. So observe as what is currently happening, not as what you would like it to be. This is what we had to do during the meditations. We had to observe the breath. For the first 3 days, we just observed the breath, and it was observe the breath as it is, not as you would like it to be. So if you're breathing in through one nostril and out through one nostril, that's okay. Don't judge it. If your breath is shallow, just observe. If your breath is deep, just observe. Don't think to yourself, I wish my breath was more even, or I wish it was deeper, or I wish I could breathe through both nostrils and my nose wasn't blocked. Instead of wanting what you don't have, just observe what it is. So something that I've started to do is, for example, with the weather, is when the weather's really hot, I just observe and I go, the weather's really hot today. I don't go, oh, it's so terrible that it's hot today, because that's then you're creating judgment and you're saying, I don't want it to be hot, right? And I don't say things like, oh, I wish it was cooler today. I'm just saying it's really hot today. I feel the hot sun on my skin. So it's a pure observation. Or if it's cold, I notice, I observe and I go, I notice I have, I notice I am shivering, for example. I notice a cold breeze on my legs, as opposed to going, oh, it's so cold, this wind, I can't stand it. Because there you go again, creating more misery. So that's a simple example. You can think about it like you're a scientist, right? So when a scientist is doing an experiment, they make a hypothesis and they say, okay, this is what I think is going to happen. This is my hypothesis. If the experiment doesn't, if the hypothesis isn't correct, the scientist doesn't go, oh no, it's not correct. Oh, I wish it was. I'm so upset at myself. It's not fair. They don't get emotionally involved. They just observe and go, hypothesis incorrect. Let's try again. Right? They don't get attached to the outcome. Well, that's as far as my understanding is in terms of what a scientist does anyway. They observe the data, they write it down, and they don't get emotionally attached to it. The second thing that I learned that I think is really important is to realize that whatever it is that you're observing, it's impermanent. This is one of the teachings of Vipassana, which I loved. It really resonated with me. There's a word for it, anicca. I hope I'm saying that right. Anicca, Anicca, which means that everything is impermanent. So let's take the weather example. You've got cold wind on your legs and your hairs are standing up and you're shivering. When you tell yourself, this is impermanent, nothing is permanent, everything rises and passes, then you think, okay, it's not going to last forever. So there's no point getting upset about it because it's going to go away anyway. This happened at Vipassana when we had like a 40 plus degree day, 40 degrees plus Celsius, and it was boiling hot. And I remember normally I'd think, oh, this is so unbearable, I can't be outside. But I remember thinking to myself, you know what, this is Melbourne. It's probably going to pass by and tomorrow's going to be cool again. And that allowed me to keep a level head. And you know what? It did. The weather turned fine the next day. So if you're experiencing something where, I don't know, maybe like your kid is screaming at you, or the train is delayed, or, you burn yourself with your coffee, I'm not sure. Just tell yourself, this is impermanent. The pain that I'm feeling right now, whatever's happening right now, it's not going to last forever. So there's no point getting attached to it. There's no point getting frustrated or angry about it because it's not going to last anyway. So why waste my energy? So that's the second thing that you can do. And then the third thing that you can do, so once you've observed what is happening, you realize that it's not permanent, then your mind is balanced enough where you can take action in a way that benefits you and benefits others. So when you don't observe, right, what happens is when you don't pause and observe, we react. We react. We yell, or we, stomp around, or maybe we get physically ill, or something, something happens. We have a reaction to that thing that happens. Maybe if you're about to give a presentation or you're in a meeting, you start to get like sweaty palms, or your heart races, or then you might start to rush your words, or you'll stumble, that sort of thing. That's a reaction. If you're able to observe what's happening and examine it objectively like a scientist and go, oh, isn't that interesting? This is happening, or that just happened. When you're able to do that, you then have a balanced mind to then act in a way that then benefits you and others. So to sum up, the way that we can be happy is not so much to draw out the happiness, but it's about removing the things that make us miserable. When unwanted things happen, observe it and don't react. If you crave something, be okay with letting it go. When we can remove those things that create the misery, it's interesting because what is left is not necessarily happiness, but it's inner peace, a level of contentment with the world. And final thing I want to say is that expecting to be happy all the time is actually not realistic, because things are going to happen to us all the time that aren't going to create happiness. You're not expected to be happy if someone close to you passes away or if you get really sick. You can't be overjoyed happy all the time. So aiming for happiness as a constant is actually not realistic and not possible. A better goal is to aim to be at peace and content. That is a much more achievable and more realistic constant to work towards. So if you can remove the aversion to what makes you miserable, if you can remove your attachments to things, what is left is in that constant level of inner peace. And you will go through life feeling at peace, feeling balanced, feeling tranquil, and confident that whatever happens, you will be prepared for and that you will be able to take on. Now, I can hear you thinking or saying, yeah, Christina, really easy to say, much harder to do. And you're absolutely right. I've had many instances since Vipassana where I have created attachments and I've noticed myself feeling miserable because of certain things. And then I've had to remind myself, remember what you learned. So this isn't something that just happens overnight. This is something that happens bit by bit each day. So I encourage you to firstly be aware of what you might be attached to. What are some things that happen to you that you create aversion to? And how can you start to let them go? Just as I did with the banana, let it go. You do not need it. You do not need it to be happy. You are unattached. Maybe you can try chanting that to yourself. And if we can start to do that, eventually we will find that inner peace. And that, my friends, is how to be happy. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, Rockstar. And exciting news as well. As an end note, the C Method Academy is launching in February. The Academy is my members-only monthly training and accountability program. If you want to join or get more information on joining, sign up for my free Small Talk Made Simple course. You'll become a subscriber and you'll be the first to be notified of when the Academy launches. So check the link in the description of this episode in your podcasting app for that link and to sign up. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Keep on being awesome, and I'll talk to you next week. I'm Christina Canters, and this has been Stand Out, Get Noticed.